Welcome to 1111 Downtown. Nice to see you all with us here this morning. Welcome to you all who happen to be watching online. We're glad to have you. Stay with us. We've been having tech issues over the last few weeks. We're looking at brand new equipment, and that'll be in a few weeks or more. But in the meantime, always just a heads up, if it does fall out of signal because the equipment's just getting older and signals are what signals are, we always have a repeat in the evening, and there's always a link for that, so check that out as well. But we're glad you're with us this morning, online and in here today as well. I see a lot of visitors. Good to have you all with us. Knowing that we have some visitors, I don't know, some of you all have been visiting with us for a while, but we have these tumblers, and we ran out of them, but these are great tumblers by the Jolin Promotions Company. 1111 on the other side, it says, sip, breathe, smile, just as a reminder. And we want our visitors to have one. So if you didn't ever get one, make sure you check the back of the table because we got a whole new batch in. And if you are members and have been coming for a while, we'll certainly sell you one as well. And they're only $12 or $15 if you like to round up, you know. And help with costs. Okay, a couple of other things while you're registering your attendance, which you can bring up here during the song that we sing together, along with an offering. And I do encourage you to find a place to do your offering, either online or here in the bowl. And if you come up, take one of these little cards to reflect on during the week. Drop the one you had last week back in there, just to give us focal points. Part of our spiritual practice is actually this idea of learning how to focus on our moments, paying attention to our moments. And we'll get into more of that today as we finish up our season of Epiphany and we begin Lent, which leads us towards, of course, Easter. Now, there's a sheet back on the back. I've advertised this a couple of weeks now. This is Linda McDermott's last, final exit Bible study, book study. It's offered on 2 different occasions. My wife is a genius. You don't want to miss it. And she's watching. Also, it really is a wonderful little short-term study looking at the whole kind of, the whole sort of arc of the Bible. It's not exactly what you think it is. In fact, it's almost always an illuminating class. So she'll be offering this on 2 opportunities during the week and on Sunday, so check back there for that. Also, a couple of things. Hey, people, First United Methodist Church has an app for that. We now have an app. Isn't that amazing? So you can go on your phone and you can go to the App Store and you can look up MyFUMC and it will link you, it will get you an app, an iOS or an Android, whichever one you're using. It's for your tablets or for your phones, not for your computers, but just tablets and phones. And it will give you an immediately direct link to both the current live stream that's up or to the previous live streams and other online events and programs that have been happening. Kind of gives you a whole list of all those things, including the 1111 service and some of the archive services. So that's a great place to check that out. Just go to the App Store and download it, okay? Then finally, there's a couple other things. If you got the bulletin, you can take a look at that. There's volunteer opportunities we'd love to connect you with. Check that out. Also on the back page, we need readers every Sunday. We need readers who come up and do the readings, do the greetings, and that sort of thing. And we love to see as many folks up here as possible. If you're willing to do that, there's a sign-up calendar in the back. Just sign your name. We're looking into March and April now. And just sign your name back there. You can see where it also says from the top to put your email and a contact and that sort of information. All right, so we invite you to do that. I think that's everything for now, except to remind you, next week is the marathon, the Cowtown Marathon. That's always a fun adventure to make your way here or to learn how to watch the service from your car at a stop sign or a stoplight, because that happens too. I get texts during the service. I didn't make it today, but I'm watching from 7th and 20th, whatever. So if you go to the church website during the week, you'll find a link that has a map that shows you what the most direct routes are to get here. It's not that hard. You just have to miss some of the usual routes you might normally take. But that happens all weekend, including during the services on Sunday morning. So check that out. Austin, do you have something?
By the way, the app does work on your Roku TV.
Oh. Oh, good.
Great way, instead of YouTube, no ads, no nothing, gives access to a lot of different material.
Okay, all right, cool, excellent. Yeah, so you can find it out that way. All right, so this morning, can we pull up our first quote this morning? It's right after this. September, I think it's right after this. There it is. Oh, nope, that's a good one, but that's not what I was thinking. Do we have it there? Let's see. I'll get... Nope. Still a great quote, but not the one we were looking for. Still another good quote. Lots of good quotes. Okay. I can always just read it here. All these wonderful... How did all these quotes get in there? All right. So here we go. Let's see. So this morning, this is what I want you to be thinking about. I put this in the e-blast. By the way, if you are not getting the e-blast, you can get the e-blast by going to the church website and just doing the subscribe there, and then you'll get on the 1111 subscription list. It will show you how to do that. Or you can just ask me. Here's what I want to... There it is. All right. So this morning, we're thinking about Transfiguration. It's always this Sunday. It's always the last Sunday of Epiphany. Always comes right before Advent. Always the Sunday before Ash Wednesday. And so we're thinking sort of about this culmination of Epiphany, which has been about finding awe and wonder in our moments, where we find the sacred breaking into our moments. But the Transfiguration is often thought of as this sort of supernatural event where people tend to either think of it as fanciful and just mythic, ancient language, or others try to make it too literal and historical, and others try to make it too much of a dogmatic kind of statement. And I want to suggest that it's actually something far more universal and mystical, if you want to use that term. It's really pointing to something that all of our stories point to. So my sermon's entitled actually Transfiguring All the Way Home. But this morning what I want you to think about is when we find ourselves gripped with fear and the unknown, we often tell limiting fear-based stories. You can think about the stories you tell when you find yourself being self-critical, or thinking about body image, or thinking about relationships, or thinking about any number of things that our culture sort of says, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, this is the way it's supposed to be on Valentine's Day, this is the way it often turns out on Valentine's Day, all that kind of stuff. We get gripped by these tales we tell ourselves. And when we do, these fear-based stories, what we find is that we create these other kinds of stories. But what the whole point of the unknown, what if the whole point of those unknown moments is to invite curiosity, humility, and awe? Can you think about that? I mean, imagine that. Loss, obstacles, pain, doubt, self-criticism. What if all of these moments, these unknowns, uncertainties, are really invitations into transfiguration? Then what happens to our stories? What happens to us as a species? What happens to the world around us? That's what we're going to talk about later on this morning. Good to have you all with us. And as we're thinking about it, take a listen to the music and see if it isn't helping to point us in this direction. Band, good to have you.
For being here, sometimes it's hard to find. You may be doing all the right things, but doing them at the wrong time. If your reasons ain't good enough for you, try this reason of mine. 'Cause I know a way we can all be free.
What a great way to start your day. Aren't you glad you came? Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. I am Margaret Sutton, and my husband George and I have been a member of 1111 for almost 10 years now. And I do believe that we help fill the world with love. So we're so glad you're here. Welcome. We're so glad our online friends are here. Welcome to you also. Our candle is lit. If those of you at home like to light a candle, now is the time. Would you join me as we speak our words of welcome together? Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come, come yet again.
Thank you, Margaret. 1111, would y'all please stand and sing a song with us now? And also, would y'all give a huge welcome? We have an extra musician on stage today, and his name is Steve Hammond. He's helping us with the keys this morning. That's a great last name for a keyboard player, too. Elena's going to sing this song. We want y'all to sing it with us, and it's also the time to bring your offering on up to the table. Here we go.
Well, I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. Oh, hallelujah. 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 Well, let me tell you that I'm walking and talking with my mind.
Now we go.
Was stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind. It was stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind. It was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah.
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 That's right.
I'm singing and praying with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I'm singing and praying with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah.
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 Rock it. Rock and roll. Would y'all take a moment and offer one another a sign of peace, please? We're going to be moving into our Kairos time now, and we'll start it off with a classic hymn. We want y'all to sing along. It's a goodie. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing of grace, streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Verse 2. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I go, and I hope thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. How you sought me as a stranger, sought me as a friend, faced with risk or any danger, you compound me with your love. Here's my heart, love, take a seat, see before thy kingdom come.
So we'll take a moment as we enter into Kairos, and as Mary Ellen comes up to also offer our prayer this morning. I invite you just to find a place of calm, and if that helps to close your eyes and to just breathe. Use the sound of the bowl just to get us started as a focal point. And then ideally, we learn to sort of listen to sounds in general as a way of focusing ourselves, and then to focus on our breathing. Such a distractible world, increasingly distracted. It's really a challenge, I think, to learn how to just focus on our breath, to come back to the very basicness of our body. We are the embodied spirit, and to pay attention to that. So let us use the bowl and then be in that place of quiet. Just take 3 long, deep breaths, maybe 4 or 5 seconds inhale, 6 or 7 seconds exhale.
Welcome to this time that isn't about time. Welcome to the time that isn't measured or counted with numbers. Welcome to the time of becoming and being, the time of breath and pause and reflection. Here in this place, you're safe. There's only love here. Love and acceptance and the joy that comes from knowing that you are accepted and loved just as you are. You don't have to change a thing. You just have to be and breathe deep from the font of blessing that is here anytime you choose to return to it. Breathe it in and let it center your soul and settle your being. Breathe deep and know that you are loved. And in this place, you can fill that empty cup of being, that loveless heart, that need for forgiveness. Let it go and let it be. And know that when you leave this place, you have a full cup of love and acceptance to pour into the lives of others around you. What a beautiful gift, this present moment. What a lovely place to come away to anytime you need to fill that empty place in your soul. Breathe it in and let it be. Amen.
Good morning, and good morning to all of you online. Welcome. It says that I'm supposed to read the gift of story. And my, what a story. From Matthew's Gospel, the 17th chapter. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up on a high mountain to be alone with them. And before their eyes, Jesus was transfigured. his face becoming as dazzling as the sun and his clothes as radiant as light. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said, "Rabbi, how good that we are here. With your permission, I will build 3 structures here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Suddenly, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Out of the cloud came a voice which said, "This is my own, my beloved, on whom my favor rests. Listen to him." The disciples fell forward on the ground, overcome with fear. Jesus came toward them, saying, "Get up, don't be afraid." When they looked up, they did not see anyone but Jesus. And then from the Tao Te Ching, number 18 is translated by Robert Rosenbaum. When the way is forgotten, benevolence and righteousness arise. When knowledge and reason rule, so does artificiality and deceit. When family relationships are not harmonious, then there is obedience and love. When a country is in dark disorder, then officials proclaim themselves virtuous. May God give us discernment and wisdom in our hearts from the words which have been spoken.
And Mary Ellen as well. I'm just going to invite you all to kind of have a quick prayer with me. Holy presence of love, we give thanks for this time to be together. We also recognize how we come in these moments vulnerable, with expectations sometimes, with definitions, with our minds made up, with some openness. So instead, we ask that we might be vulnerable and open and curious this morning as we gather in the presence of one another. Amen. So one of the things I think it's interesting because we do this singing bowl, and as some of you don't know the story, but of course I started using singing bowls back 25, 30 years ago when I started working at hospitals. And I was working with kids who have cancer, and they'd be at camps or at hospitals, and then other kids who had hemophilia, and then it just went on down the line working with pediatric medical camps as a musician, a storyteller, and kind of an artistic resource, and then going to hospitals and touring as well. And one of the interesting things, of course, that you find when you're in a hospital is how difficult it is to focus on anything but the next anxious moment. Because there's monitors beeping, there's all sorts of noise, there's people interrupting your space. It's a very anxious, distractible space. And so one night, I was at a camp, and I was using the singing bowl just as a fun way of creating a sound effect to a story I was telling, and one of the kids later on said, "Could I borrow that?" And the kid, it was a young teenager, he borrowed it, and he took it to his cabin, and he played with it all night long. Now, at first, it was kind of, annoying, because he was just like, "Look how much noise I can make with this." But eventually, something happened. Eventually, he found it relaxing. He actually began to find it kind of a relaxing tone, just listening to that tone. And sure enough, after a couple of years, I got the idea that we could donate these to kids in hospitals that would want them. And they'd have to be taught how to use them without making too much noise, or else they'd start freaking out nursing staff, thinking something else had gone off. But in fact, the kids found themselves using them at the hospital, using them at the home, just small ones that had very small, light tones, as a way of both feeling the vibration, right, and then also focusing their minds for a little while, just taking deep breaths. And that alone increased the quality of their experience there in the hospitals. So when I use a bowl like this, for me, it's partly in that spirit that I use it. It's not anything magical. It's not something, pagan or sort of it's mystical in the sense that it invites us to pay attention. And so I love kind of playing with these things. It might be a tone that you could have at home, or an insight timer on the app that you can get. But that's the idea of using these kinds of things. And the whole idea of prayer, I'm changing my mind about constantly. I'm trying to figure out, what is prayer exactly? I remember once being invited by a good friend of mine who knows my rather progressive and secular kind of orientation to everything. I like to decompose things. And by the way, not deconstruct. I've gotten rid of the word deconstruct. Deconstruct carries bad connotations with it, which I don't think is the case. But I like the word decompose because it's natural. It's reality. Things come apart. Things fall away. Things die. But you know what? Something new always grows in its place. So I like the idea of decompose. So my faith is decomposing. It has been over the years, but it's becoming something new. And so once I was invited to do this prayer, and I remember walking into the room, and it was a friend of mine who knows me well, another pastor, who says, Tom, I want you to do the prayer this evening for the blessing for all of our friends here. And I looked at him and I said, really? He said, I'd like you to do the prayer. And I said, you want me to do like a prayer? And he said, yeah, would you do a prayer? And I said, but we're all friends here. You know me. You really want me? He said, I want you to do I said, Linda does a much better prayer. And he looked at me and I said, all right. And I took a deep breath and I said, let's all take a deep breath. And I said, some of you know I know well. Some of you don't know as well. But I know what it means to be human. I know what it means to be a part of this creation. I know how our lives can have hidden things in them that we don't always bring to the surface, and we carry them like burdens. And other things we experience as joy, like this moment that we have together. So I invite this moment to wash over those other moments, just for a time, to remind us we're more than those other moments we sometimes carry around. And then I said, amen. The guy next to me looked at me and said, that's the best damn prayer I've heard in a long time. So, I mean, I'm just being vulnerable and honest here, because this is the way that this is why I think we do what we do here in 1111, is to find a way to be more authentically engaged with what we understand as our spirituality and as our faith after the life and teachings of Jesus, after the traditions that many of us grew up with in the church. Where are we now with that? And it's in that same light that I want to look at Transfiguration this morning. So I want to bring up this first picture because I talked about it in my e-blast this week. I just told the story, but I love this. The caption is not shown below, but in the caption below, she says, "You've changed." Now, it's obviously a fun tongue-in-cheek and a fun pun, but it got me thinking, because it came out at the beginning of the week, which, of course, was Valentine's, right? And Valentine's carries with it that interesting paradox, if you will, where there's so much expectation at the same time. There's also joy and delight, and then there's also guilt and shame, and then also a sense of loneliness and awkwardness or loss and pain. It's just a real day of baggage. And so how do you participate in that as a moment, as an invitation to actually see something powerful, that's beyond all of the trappings and the superficiality and all of that stuff? And so I loved this as a way to just sort of introduce that. A couple of weeks ago, I had a birthday. I'm not sure if I shared this in here, but I had a birthday, and it was my double-digit birthday. I won't tell you which. You can think I'm 55 if you like. And I got a call from my son, who FaceTimed me with my granddaughter, who's 5 years old, almost 5 years old, and it was on Facebook. Linda posted it on her page on Facebook. And so we got this it wasn't a video, it was a video they sent. And it just apparently they'd gone to our house, my son and his two daughters had gone to our house, and they'd found their way to the Hope Chest, and they pulled out the old wedding pictures. And so it had her looking at the wedding pictures, and you could hear my son saying, "Well, Maeve, who is that?" And she said, "I don't know." "No, who's that? Who's that?" "Well, that's Oma, that Linda." He said, "Well, who's that at the wedding?" "I don't know." He said, "That's Daddo." "That's not Daddo." "No, that's Daddo." That's my grandfather name. He said, "That's Daddo." She said, "That's not Daddo." And she got really defiant. He said, Maeve, that is not Daddo. That is Oma. That's not Daddo. Who's she with? That's not Daddo. And then he just said, "Happy birthday." But it really is interesting, because it got me thinking about all of the lives we live and all the ways people see us, right? When we're in high school, we're seen one way. When we're in college, we're seen another way. When we're married, we're seen another way. When we're much older, we're seen another way. If we grow up with people and over a period of time, we are allowed to sort of see ourselves evolve, decompose, and evolve again, right? And we're not always the same, but it's a great reminder that life is impermanent, that life is full of change, and that's just the reality of life. And the invitation is to see what's wondrous about that as opposed to what's disappointing. So it wouldn't be surprising that later that week, this was 2 weeks ago when I was in Del Norte, Colorado at my brother-in-law's place. My brother-in-law have a place out there. And my brother-in-law happened to be there with us that time, and we went to a grocery store there in the little town, and a woman walked up who works with them, and she came in and she said, "Hi, Stan." And Stan said, "I want you to meet my brother." And she looked at me for a long time, and then she said, "Wait a minute, that's not Michael. That's my brother, Michael. He looks just like Michael." And Stan said, "That's right, they do look alike." And I said, "Yeah, we're 18 months apart. I do look a lot like my younger brother." "Oh, no, but you're a lot shorter." And I smiled and said, "Yes, I am." I mean, we get all of these wonderful reminders that we're not what maybe we're not what we want to be, or maybe we shouldn't want to be anything but what we actually are. And even that is transitory. Even that is changing. I have a couple other quick images just to remind me, just kind of that I thought were funny reminders. The heaviest burdens that we carry are the thoughts in our head, right? That's true. That's really what we get. Like, again, Anne Lamott, I don't like going in my brain because it's a bad neighborhood in there. The next one, I love this one. When I look at all the stars, it's hard for me to believe that I'm really the center of the universe. Come on, who here doesn't want to think that from time to time? Or always? Anyway, all right, next one. I love this too. Can you describe these countless wasted hours that ultimately make up the bulk of your life? Lost and found. James Joyce had it this way when he started off his book, Ishmael, if y'all have read that novel. I mean, the short story, I said Ishmael. Dubliners, The Dubliners is one of his short story collections. And he said, Mr. Duffy lived just a short distance from his body. So when the disciples go up the mountain, they're invited, the three of them, by the way. 3 is the great sacred number, right? It's the great number that's sort of a universal formula. You have the Trinity, you have the 3. Here you have beginning, middle, and end. You almost have 3 kinds of events that happen before the final transformation happens in all of our folk tales. 3 little pigs, Goldilocks, the 3 bears. I mean, all of these things, 3 is a very powerful number in the world, especially in Western cultural narrative. And so here you have the 3 disciples going up with Jesus. And they're important disciples because it's Peter and it's John and it's James, and it's sort of like key figures in the early church movement. And keep in mind, this is written in retrospect, right? This is written 30 or 40 years after Jesus' death. So these are stories trying to understand who Jesus was when Jesus wasn't what everyone thought Jesus was. Because everyone thought Jesus was the Messiah. Now, in that Jewish culture, the Messiah meant the Davidic king who was going to come take over things, who was going to come back and reestablish the kingdom of God, the reign of God, under a godly chosen, a God-ordained leader, and that would naturally be in the Davidic line, because that had been the history of Judaism for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And so that was the challenge. That was the belief system, and Jesus wasn't that. So the Transfiguration has several points. It has several reasons for being there. One of them being, it could be to confirm. I mean, it was written as a confirmation. That's why Elijah and Moses appeared, because they're justifications. They link Jesus up with the Old Testament and the Davidic line. Or maybe it was because they just wanted to justify that Jesus was actually the Messiah. Or maybe it had something else to do with the power of what a story reminds us of when we can hear it for its deeper meanings. That, I think, is the challenge that we have as 21st century people. I mentioned in the last week that we also celebrated but remembered Galileo's trial, because he was convicted in 1633 in the third week of February. He was actually convicted and then charged Prison. His sentence was house arrest, and all of his books were banned and put away, locked away. Especially the one in which he proved that the earth is not the center of the universe, but in fact, the sun is the center of our solar system. The earth revolves around the sun. Very controversial, because actually humanity is God's chosen center of everything. Anthropomorphism is like everywhere, right? Or anthropocentrism is everywhere. We think it's all about us. There's 1,000 million billion other creatures out there that will probably outlive the human species. There's a whole universe out there of mystery that we have no idea. So when we boldly go forth into our days, perhaps our boldness should be tempered by a great deal of humility and wonder. What if, in fact, that's what the Transfiguration story is inviting, is the invitation to go into our moments with wonder and not with this sense of we're in charge, it's all about us. The minute that Peter sees Jesus being transfigured, he says, let's build some altars here, let's build some tents, let's build a worship space, and we'll put you in a box and worship you. And it disappears, right? That's what seems to happen. All right, so about 10 years ago, 20 years ago, a couple of decades ago, I was in Ireland, and I did a 30-day trip on my bicycle around Ireland by myself. I've told you all some of these stories before. One of the genius, wonderful people that I met that was a total surprise to me was my roommate. I was 40 at the time, and he was, or 42, and he was like 21 or 22. He was a Japanese student in Ireland at the Cultural Center on the far northwestern coast of Glencullimkill in Donegal, where it was a very primitive area, and we were all there to study Gaelic for 7 days. I took 7 days out of my trip to stay there and study Gaelic. Tiny little one-street town, went to a coastal hotel down on the coast, kind of a little resort area at the coast, but the rest of the town was very small and simple. And there was a cultural center, there was a great cathedral and a cemetery, Catholic church and cemetery, and then there were 4 pubs that lined the street. So they had their priorities. So during the day, we'd go study Gaelic, and during night, we'd go hang out at the pubs, and then he and I were a roommate at a bed and breakfast. He spoke broken English, but he was just a joy to be around because he was so different and interesting. And yet there was a naivete about him. I just thought, you're so naive. I mean, there's so much richness here in culture, and he was just eating everything up. One night, we went to the pub, and we listened as a woman stood up there, because the pub is a cultural center, really. A pub is where families and everyone gather, children, adults, everyone. And after a time, finally, a young woman, they encouraged her. They took a lot of goading until finally she stood up and she started singing Feravata, which is a beautiful little haunting song. Feravata, Snow-Wella, Feravata, Snow-Wella. And it goes on for a while. And it's a woman standing on the coast, looking over the cliffs, across the great ocean to America, where her lover has traveled. And she doubts she'll ever see him again. That story of brokenness seems to be pretty prominent in the western shores of Ireland. Ireland has a rich history of sort of being abused and cast out. You know, all of the conflicts that went with them in England over the years. And that land is rough and scrabble. It's just rocky soil. If you've been there, cliffs and the Atlantic Ocean crashing into the cliffs. And so she stood there watching the ebb and flow of the waves as she sang the song. And when this young woman sang the song, she was a teacher or a clerk, something, but she wasn't a singer. And yet when she sang the song, you never heard anything so pure. And there were tears in the room, and afterwards, great cheering. One night after that, that happened 2 or 3 times that she sang that song. One night after that, I was making my way home back to the B&B, and I was by myself. It was about 11 o'clock, and someone came toward me in the dark. The streets were dark except for occasional street lamps, and they were in the shadows, and they came toward me, a little terrifying, very cold feeling as I approached them. And when I approached them, I said, Giadwitch, in Gaelic, which is a way of saying hello, and I said, Giadwitch, and they didn't say anything back, and I said, Giadwitch again, very much louder, and this time they just grunted at me, as if angry, and kept walking. But I noticed the walk was stiff. I noticed he had on an overcoat. I noticed that he walked into the Catholic cemetery, and I noticed he disappeared. Well, now it was kind of foggy. He kind of went over into the woods or into the cemetery, kind of disappeared behind stones and such. I didn't see him again the next night, and the next night after that, I went to one of the pub owners, and I said, Patrick, and he said, yes, Tom. I said, Patrick, I think I saw somebody last night, 2 nights ago, that kind of gave me pause. I mean, I wouldn't say this because I don't believe this, but if I knew better, the guy looked dead. And he was walking, and he didn't smile, he didn't look anything. He got a very serious look on him, and he looked at me, and he says, describe him for me. We know most of the dead people in our town that walk about. And so I described him, and he said, I don't know that one. And he asked around. And he says, do you know anybody about 6'4", does grunts instead of says anything? And they were all kind of looking at each other, looked at him, says, no, we don't know that. And so about 4 days passed. And then on the fourth night, Yutaka Ozawa, the Japanese student in linguistics who was my roommate, and myself got together 5 other people from the cultural center that had been part of the 12-member class, and we went out on a search for the dead guy that I saw walking one night. And it was a fun, amazing, wonderful time as we walked about in the cemetery. We walked throughout the village. Villagers would actually come out of their house because it was about 9 o'clock at night, and we'd be walking along with flashlights, and they'd say, are you looking for the dead guy? And we'd say, yeah, well, good luck to you. And it was just a fun evening as we were walking all about. And of course, we never saw anybody. And then at the end of the whole trip, it was one night before we were all leaving, and Patrick came over to me, and he says, Tom, look over there leaning up against the wall. Would that be the dead guy that you saw? And sure enough, it looked exactly like him there in the light of the pub. And he was sitting there, and he says, well, he's deaf, and he has trouble speaking, so he doesn't say much. But we all love him, and he's a great fella. His name is, I can't remember the name, it was Jimmy or something, but he says, he's really fun, and everyone loves him. We all kind of figured that may be who you might have thought it was. He's a bit suspicious at night when he's by himself. But we all thought it was great fun to go looking for dead people anyway. So afterwards, I got back to my room, and my roommate, Yutaka Ozawa, who's a linguist, he looked at me and he says, this was so much fun. We got to look for dead people in Ireland. I've never done that before. And he was just laughing at the whole silliness of it. And then he remembered the beauty of the song, and we were just recounting all these things, and he said a phrase that I want you to remember. It's a Japanese phrase, but I want you to remember the idea. He smiled and he said, Mono no arare. Arare. Arare is hard to say. Mono no arare. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, arare. And I said, well, how do you spell that? He says, Aware. I said, aware? He says, arare. He says, not aware. And I said, but it sounds like aware. And he says, no, it means things are what they are and then they aren't. But while they are, they're lovely. So it's kind of the ephemeral impermanence. And it's kind of a way of saying, like, that's just the way things are, if we were to say that around here, except that it carries a much deeper sense of attention. And I want to leave you with this last idea before I bring the band up. I'll go ahead and bring up the band. They can come on up here. But I want to leave you with this last idea of how we practice this idea of transfiguration that I experienced not just in moments like being in Japan, but I experienced it with the woman at the grocery store when she says, you look exactly like your brother, but a whole lot shorter. Or my granddaughter who says, that's not you, because it wasn't me. This is me now, and this is how she'll remember me. But other people remember me another way, and I remember them other ways, and we're all of that, and we're none of that. And so I like this idea that I read once, that if we stop seeing life and God and sacredness as this vertical thing, but more as this horizontal reality, imagine that every moment and everything is like a pop-up picture book. Do you remember those? And every time you lift that moment up, something you didn't expect is there. Everything we encounter, every moment is like those little picture books and an invitation to just lift up and see what else is there. How can we practice being present enough to our moments to see what is in fact right there in front of us? Mono no aware. Let's get to the last quote here, if you don't mind. There we go. This is the way that John O'Donohue put it. John O'Donohue, the wonderful Celtic poet and writer, Christian writer, no longer with us. To grow is to become more than you have been, to transform uncertainty into presence and allow what is false to fall away. The way Jesus might have put it is, let's go up in the mountain. And by the way, everything is a mountain. Everything is a mountaintop experience and opportunity. Let's go up there and see what we see. Oh, but don't cling to it. Just be present to it. Be compassionate. And be willing to let it go so that you can be present to the next moment. This is how I think we're invited to make our way homeward, transfiguring life all the way home. This is how we do it. So the last thing I want to leave you with, an instruction. pay attention this week to your breath and your body, and pay attention to all your moments. Take an opportunity to take a deep breath, count to 5, inhale, count to 7, exhale, and then see what's around you. I'm going to invite you to do this often. Your homework is just to do it once every day. Whatever you see, don't just say, oh, that's just that. Lift it up, metaphorically. See what else is there for about 3 minutes. Every moment is an opportunity to experience the sacred and transfigure our way home. Amen.
Once it was a way to get back home. Once there was a way to get back home. Sleep in the dark, or do not cry. And I will sing a lullaby. Golden stars fill your eyes. Stars are when you rise. Sleep in the dark, do not cry. And I will sing a lullaby. Once there was a way to get back home. Once there was a way to get back home. Sleep in the dark, you do not cry. And I will sing a lullaby. You're gonna carry that weight, carry that weight a long time. Oh, you're gonna carry that weight, carry that weight a long time.
That was so awesome. And y'all just stay standing for our benediction, but I got to tell you, Brad and I might have been a little high when we decided to do this one. No. But we were so excited about how this tied in so well with everything we've been talking about this whole series. And the band's never done that song before. We had to, of course, trim out a little bit, but such a great job, such a beautiful thing, and such a great way to send us off. So let's just have our benediction, and I hope you can carry this spirit with you throughout the week. May you be blessed as you go about in this world. May you be blessed with that discovery that in every moment where you least thought there was something, you decided to stop and notice and discover God was right there. Discover the sacred was right there. Discovered it only took your eyes to see it. Amen.